How is everyone doing tonight? As many of you know, my name is Michael Lloyd. I actually am in the process of starting a non-profit foundation entitled Enough is Enough Foundation. And many of you also are aware that over the past, I think 6 months, many of you who personally know me, I've become more aware with who I am. And I thank every single one of you for being there at that exact moment when we met, because unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there who didn't have the opportunity to have those key people like you in my life as you had in mine. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of those people. Secondly, let me just say thank you to everyone who gave a donation to my birthday cause for Hope and Help in Central Florida, which is an HIV and AIDS awareness center who actually deals with therapy, counseling, and also testing, which is free. And that's actually located in Winter Park. So just wanted to actually thank Rob Domenico, the director of Hope and Help, very much for the opportunity in which to spread the word and actually start a little short charity for my birthday, because I was talking to him about it and I said, you know, I've been blessed tremendously, and does anybody need anything on this earth? Absolutely not. But I think the key thing that everyone does deserve and is entitled to is that happiness, to be able to live healthily and to live in a very stress-free environment. And unfortunately as well, many of you also are aware, if you're working for the center or Hope and Help, and even friends back in central New Jersey, such as my friend Wade Toman, who's starting his own nonprofit, which actually at the moment he's got a support group called UP, which is called United People Positive, and he's also aware that there's a big issue down in Central Florida, and the state of Florida for that matter, for ADAP, which is the AIDS Assistant Program for Medication. And unfortunately, I think that there's a lack of, for lack of a better word, there's a lack of knowledge to those people who are the key people who are providing us with that funding. And over the years, you know, HIV and AIDS hasn't really been an issue, because obviously people take their meds, people go to the doctor, they see their psychologist, their therapist, whatever they need to do to get along during the day, they do it. So obviously that's, you know, people in the government don't really think it's a priority in which to provide funding to these states such as Florida and the state of New York, which is the most prominent for HIV and AIDS contractions. And many of you are also aware, and if not, I will say this, actually about 20% of people with HIV and AIDS do not actually know that they have it. And that's a gay statistic, an overall statistic. And about 10 to 15% of those people who actually do have it, and that 20% are in the straight community. So I think society has this stigma that from back in the 80s and 90s, and 89, that, you know, all the gay people in the world have HIV. And if you do drugs, whether it's intravenous, whether you're smoking it, whether you're snorting it, whatever the case may be, that unfortunately, just because you're in that community and there's that lessened sense of coherency or good decisions, that you are then going to make bad choices based on those choices, you know, based on that environment of friends you seek out. And then overall, as a whole, the gay community has this stigma, and has had, that HIV and AIDS is extremely prominent. Now, I will say this, from a standpoint of growing up in a very Christian home, my parents always said, Michael, you don't want to get AIDS, you don't want to get HIV, it's too expensive, we can't afford it. And who can afford it? Especially when there are pharmaceutical companies out there who are charging you up the behind for medication for something that they're making trillions off of, when essentially, at the end of the day, it doesn't cost them very much to make. I don't know if many of you are aware, the actual big company Gilead, who does a lot of studies for many of you here in Orlando at OIC, which is Orlando Immunology Clinic, that pharmaceutical company is actually buying out in cash another company, which is $30 million, from my understanding. And many of you, if that is an incorrect statistic, please let me know so I can put that on my notes. But it's just, I think, going back to the ADAP situation, which I don't think it's an issue about money or an issue about government, because I think in this whole economy, people complain about, oh, there's too much government, or there's not enough government. But when it comes down to it, what is it that you want out of life? Do you want to be dependent on someone else to tell you and then dictate the way in which your life is going to be dependent on? Or would you rather someone come along who actually wants to make a difference in society and who wants to say, you know what, as a whole, we need to come together and stand up for our individual creativity as human beings and respect ourselves enough to say, you know what, at some point or another, whether or not we made the decision to go and do a certain drug with someone, like myself in the past, I'm actually a recovering crystal meth addict, and I've been clean for about 7 months, and for those people who may have done drugs, it's whether or not their mindset was altered or their decision-making was altered due to the drug. I think in that whole PMP, as many of you are aware online, you know, the different websites, for hooking up, PMP, many of those people in that lifestyle get caught up in the day-to-day, let's go do this, let's smoke this, let's smoke, whatever it may be, and then have unprotected sex. And within that, let me elaborate quickly before I move on and finish my sentence, that there are many people who, they don't really know what the complications are. Because for myself, I'm HIV positive, and it will be 2 years this coming January 26th. And nobody ever has told me exactly what happens when somebody with HIV has sex with someone who else is HIV positive, unprotected. For example, if I were to go out and bottom for someone and they were to ejaculate, would I then contract another form of the virus, or would I not? I myself am currently not on medication, however my numbers are fairly well. But for the person who's not on medication and whose numbers are not in good condition whatsoever, are they then at risk to contract a third strain of the virus, in which then both people are incapable of getting any medication? And for a while I was told, you know, Michael, you're going to be fine, you're going to be great, we're going to start you on meds, and then nobody did. And I then contracted hepatitis C. But many of you, and I talked to a friend today, which I'm actually going to have on the show probably tomorrow morning. His name is Kurt Wagner. He's actually a teacher here in Orlando for film, and he's a dear friend of mine. I was talking to him this evening, and he said, you know, what is it about doctors? They only tell you what you want to hear. They say, don't do this. For example, many of you, like my age, I'm 22, went to school and we had that whole DARE program, which is the whole against drugs thing. And they say, you know, don't do drugs, you'll get into this, you'll get sick, you'll do whatever the case may have been. So when you come back to terms with everything that goes on in society, you see that, you know what, there's not really an issue on the people who have it or what's being taught. Going back again to my point that I just lost myself on, you know, unfortunately, as I said, starting this out, there are people who contracted it due to the choice to be in a situation where their mind and body was altered, and that's quite unfortunate. However, like myself, that's the way I contracted HIV. It's because I actually chose to partake in a particular drug, which was crystal meth at the time, and I really had no idea what I was doing. And, you know, my whole venture in this whole nonprofit is to help people like myself who didn't know. And it's not that hard. Everyone, yourself, me, can make a video, whatever it may be. We can stand up for our community and for our friends, for our loved ones, so that this cannot become a further epidemic. And like myself, I chose to get into drugs, and I didn't care. Because, you know what, I was in this world where, you know, my life was great, I was done with high school, I got into college, and I dropped it. I didn't really care exactly what my parents said, the people who adopted me from an amazing country, which at the time, unfortunately, was going through an extreme communist poverty ring at the time. However, I didn't care. Excuse me. And, you know, at the end of it, I come back here and I sit here in front of you and tell you that, you know what, we all make mistakes. We all make the choice at some point or another to do something. And out of that percentage of people, like myself, who was in the whole drug situation, like many others have been, which is the way they contracted HIV, there are those people who unfortunately do not have that choice. There are those people who were raped, or they were molested, or perhaps even blood transfusion, which I actually know someone who's actually 7 years old who has had that done to them. And actually I have a friend as well who works in something with law. And unfortunately in his position he was doing something during hours, and during a physical altercation he became HIV positive. And you know what? There are those people who, unfortunately, and it's sad to me, who actually didn't make the actual choice, if that makes sense to you. But, you know, ultimately, when it comes down to it, you and me, Michael Chandler Lloyd, coming from my parents' home in Orlando, Florida, we all have the gift of life. And whether or not you want to embrace that, or whether or not you want to pull life from what's being offered to you or not, we all have that gift of life, and that gift of friendship, and that gift of being a person. And whether or not this video may suck, and it probably does, because I'm scatterbrained and I'm nervous, but you know, my point is, when it comes down to it with all these situations, especially for people here in Central Florida, I just want to reach out to you and say, you know what? Please support me in what I'm doing in this movement of public speaking and starting a nonprofit, because there are many people out there who are offering support once you already have HIV. And to actually, and my biggest goal is to limit the funding in which all of these other corporations and nonprofits need to function, because I plan to try and go to universities, colleges. I plan to write a book, which I'm actually doing at the moment. I plan to start a radio show and a live podcast feed in which I'll be posting simultaneously about 3 times a week, if possible. And I plan to have singers, both in the gay community, straight community. I plan to have both amateur actors, actresses, and also a couple pretty well-known people. So it's not just going to be your average Joe on the street or someone you saw on Grindr on the video blog with me. It's going to be real people. At the same time, I'm probably going to ask, and if anybody has any relation to what I'm talking about or would like to speak out, please give me a call or send me an email. My email and phone number are listed at the bottom of this information sheet on the description page for the video. And I just want people to, you know, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to speak up. And if that means essentially doing what you can for yourself. You see people all the time. You know, I was walking through New York, for example, a couple days ago, New York City, and there's people holding signs, just little cardboard signs saying HIV positive, and there's a dog that looks like it's not been fed in like 3 or 4 weeks. And it's sad to me, because you know what the problem is? I've been at that point where I've almost been homeless, and I've been at that point where my parents have kicked me out 4 times in the past 2 years. Only a couple of you know it's been once, because I've chosen to keep that on my own business. But I've pretty much been near homeless. And you know what? It's not that hard. And the thing is, that's another outlet I would like to go and help out, is the homeless community. Because as well as, you know, people who aren't educated, why is it that society, when you walk by a homeless person, even myself, I did it the other day. I did it on Sunday, actually, when I first got to New York 2 weeks ago. This man said, "Hey, can I have some money?" I said, "No, fuck off." Well, you know, why is that? Why do I have such a poor self-esteem for myself that I was rude to him? And you say, why poor self-esteem? Because if I can't love myself enough, how am I supposed to love you? And how am I supposed to love somebody else? And you know, I'm not perfect. However, at the same time, I should be willing to take that initiative to say, you know what? How's your day going? How are you doing? And you know, I thought back on it, and I walked down to the Lexington